Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. Woo wee! I am so psyched today to connect with Dr. Brandon Nappi. He is a lecturer at the Yale Divinity School. So, we are going to be talking about all things spirituality and just diving right in there. We just touched upon nothing being off limits, and so I can't wait to welcome him to the podcast. Hi, Brandon.
Hello, Katie. Thank you for your important work in the world. I'm honored to be here.
Yes, I'm so happy you're here too. I've really been enjoying your content on social media about the realm of spirituality, and it's a realm I really love digging into with my clients, particularly when they're exploring their relationship to alcohol or any variation of self-medication, because I think spiritual health is just very key when it comes to wanting to escape our lives. And so I love starting off with a question about you and how you got here. So, if you don't mind, just sharing a little bit about your own path to spirituality, what led you to where you are today, what shaped you.
Yeah, thank you. So I had a pretty traditional Catholic upbringing. I'm a second generation Catholic American kid from Waterbury, Connecticut, kind of post-industrial town here in the Northeast, like so many that kind of economically collapsed when industry went elsewhere. And yet, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were still really vibrant communities where people would come together and they would eat together and they would celebrate together. Um, and there was this really profound awakening that I had in high school when I was working as the church janitor one summer on my summer vacation. It was my very first job. And there was something about the silence of the empty church and the sacred space and the beauty of the light coming through the stained glass and even the dust as it would sort of shimmer in the afternoon light and I felt a kind of connection. I mean, I didn't have language for it at the time. I didn't have mystical language to describe it, but I felt like I was encountering um, something really beautiful and something moving and something that I wanted more of, and I wanted to help other people encounter too. Um, and so, after I went to college and I studied mysticism and medieval studies, and I studied Italian poetry and Dante, and I studied abroad and had many adventures. There was a part of me that was a seeker, and I was always looking for what I felt like was a missing piece, and I thought I could find it in achievement, in academic degrees. I thought I could find it in relationships. Um, and the more I would seek and the more I would accomplish, actually, the less happy I was.
Mm.
Um, and so there was something in me that was just always curious about what that space was inside of me that was longing for wholeness. And as I journeyed, I always just had a heart for other people and wanting to walk with other people as they yearn for wholeness as well. I studied to be a priest for a time, a Roman Catholic priest. I left that to get married. I came here to Yale Divinity School when I was, oh gosh, when I was 23 years old, because I knew that I wanted to study the deepest questions that human beings could ask. Why are we here? And why are we unhappy? And how can we live more wholeheartedly? And how can we live more peacefully together? And how can we support one another's thriving and waking up to beauty and to love and to reconciliation? And so all these huge questions were in my heart from those first moments, 14 years old, vacuuming in an empty church in Waterbury, Connecticut. And so it's been a beautiful journey that's taken me to monasteries, Christian monasteries, and Buddhist monasteries. I've studied Zen meditation. I've become a meditation teacher. I've sort of stood for most of my professional life at the intersection of Zen and Christianity. I've been nourished in overwhelming ways by the 12-step traditions. Though I'm not in recovery, I've been so profoundly shaped by the steps.
Mm.
And it's been the blessing of my life to be able to learn from one another as I walk with them, um, as they've sought their soul's deepest longing. And of course, it's really relational because I find my soul's deepest longing when I walk with others and support them as they do their seeking as well. So I'm really, really thankful for the
Yeah.
work that been able to do.
Yeah. It reminds me of that quote, we're all just walking each other home. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a Ram Dass
I
quote.
think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you read my mind because I was just thinking about that quote on the way over here today. We've had a lot of violence in our country, and another, you know, church shooting over the
Oh
weekend.
God.
And can we get back to this kind of responsibility to one another, to care for each other, to have compassion with one another across difference. But here's the thing, like in my one-on-one work with people, I do a lot of one-on-one work that we might call spiritual direction or spiritual guidance or coaching. There's all these different names for it. But um, if folks are feeling some amount of anxiety or despair or discontent, or they just feel off, what I find is they're often blaming themselves, and there may certainly be some responsibility that they need to take. But we often forget that we live in a kind of culture that is mad, that is oriented to greed, to consumerism, to busyness, to productivity. And our culture is producing anxiety and despair within us. Um, it's working like a well oiled, predictable machine. So part of the work that I feel really grateful to do is to help people to step back from these inherited cultural capitalist patterns and programming that we've inherited, to wake up to something new, something more humane, our
Hmm.
heart's desire rather than the capitalist machine's desire.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I was just talking about that this morning with a client is our programming and how we don't know what we don't know. And until we kind of release everything we do know and get curious, we don't realize how much these implanted programs are running our lives and our
Oh,
reality and our emotions. And we are kind of puppets to our programming until we bring awareness to it and actively decide to implant belief systems that are supportive to our happiness and fulfillment and release ones that have been holding us prisoner to anger and resentment and division. And so it's really beautiful you mentioned that. And while you were talking, I just kept thinking to ask if you're subscribed to a particular religion or kind of subscribe to what resonates amongst all the ones you've studied, and then
yeah.
how you explain that difference of religion versus spirituality to people.
Yeah. So, to my Buddhist friends, I'm the Christian guy. To my Christian friends, I often, get called the Buddhist guy. I am a follower of the mystical path of Jesus, so that's where I'm most at home. I'm certainly a Christian. This tradition has been really, really nourishing to my heart. Um, and I always feel like, sadly, in this day and age, that there's many footnotes that need to be added to that because there is a kind of growing strain of Christian fundamentalism in the air
Yeah.
that's violent, that actually has very little to do with the teachings of Jesus, that is dehumanization, that is dehumanizing to both, folks who are not white, who are not men, has a very narrow and violent vision of the role of women, of our queer friends, and so I really want to be clear in distancing myself from those forms of Christianity and colonial Christianity, which have dehumanized. I've given my life to a kind of generous um, expression of Christianity that sees the image of God in all people, that is inclusive, and that follows Jesus in the work of transforming culture into more just and loving spaces. So we're seeking the beloved community, a place where everyone can belong and show up and thrive. And this kind of faith radically um, critiques any system like capitalism, like white nationalism that dehumanizes in any form. So I'm a follower of Jesus, and I'll say that Zen Buddhism has nourished my heart, continues to on a daily basis. My primary practice is zazen, Zen meditation, and my zazen practice has opened me to insights about Christianity that I don't know that I could have had in any other way. So, as the wonderful interreligious scholar Paul Knitter would say, without the Buddha, I can't be a Christian.
Yeah,
Right. So there's a way in which these two traditions have become
I love that.
sort of woven together,
Yeah.
braided together in a way that I know doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but it makes it makes
It
perfect
actually
sense to
makes
me.
perfect sense to me, and I feel very similarly to you. I actually went to a Presbyterian Christian private school when I was younger. Not because my family was particularly religious, mostly because the public schools weren't that great where I lived. And so my mom's like, this is nice. And I had a very positive experience of Christianity as a child. And I know sometimes people have religious traumas that taint
Of
their
course.
perspective of religion and move them towards spirituality. And people feel this kind of separation from religion with spirituality. But for me, my seeking, like you mentioned, and my curiosity has kind of led me to blending what resonates for me of Christianity, spirituality, and I see a lot of overlap in this, faith in a higher consciousness and an interconnection and finding individual purpose that is actually collectively healing. All of those themes that you see woven through spirituality and Christianity, and anything that starts getting dogmatic, and this is the only way to look at it, I am immediately repelled.
Yeah.
So, and I find that sometimes with more like dogmatic versions of Christianity or literal interpretations of the Bible and stuff like that, I feel a little bit uh like it goes contrary to the spirit of what Christianity is in ways, and sometimes that confuses me a little bit.
Mm.
I notice that there's a lot with Christianity around the, no use of like affirmation cards or tarot cards
Oh,
or like stuff where it can be looking at anything for spiritual guidance outside of Jesus or God is frowned upon. But I feel, we can find connection to the divine through different things. And so I'm just
yeah.
feel like I'm still exploring and searching. But for me, spirituality definitely includes God and Jesus and Buddha as well. So.
Yeah. If I've learned anything over the years, it's that God is big. And God is always bigger than our categories. God is bigger than our institutions. God is bigger than our dogma, and God is bigger than our language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yes, I'm against the kind of fundamentalism that shows up in a variety of formats. I mean, Christianity has certain corners of Christianity have perfected fundamentalism. Of course, Christianity is a vast,
Yeah.
vast body, and you'll find corners of Christianity that are quite generous and inclusive and welcoming and creative and expansive and would love your affirmation cards. And you'll find others that will run away screaming and condemn you to hell if you use those same cards. Right? So it's a really pluralistic and heterogeneous space. So I mean, I welcome listeners to really be open-hearted, be curious, be cautious for sure, but be gracious when you're having conversations with Christians, because like everyone else, we hold a variety of different beliefs. And you know, I think what I'm coming to understand about spirituality is the real need to balance um, inner authority and external authority. We're all sort of balancing this in our own frames, right? Finding our own authority, our and trusting our own intuition and experience, and
Hmm.
then also coming into conversations with experts and a tradition. And, I mean, the 12 steps are a great example of this. The 12 steps are a kind of external authority in a way, right? They've been handed down to us. They're tried and true. If you've ever worked the steps, some of them are really frustrating and hard. And at the beginning, we resist them. It's a kind of beautiful external authority. Um, and so it's in any spiritual journey, we're welcoming the beauty of something outside of ourselves, and we're welcoming the beauty of our own inner voice, our own experience, our own intuition.
Yeah.
And the mistake is to overvalue one or the other, but to bring them into conversation. Every tradition is going to need to balance this in its own way, and every tradition has its teachers that balance this incorrectly, right? I mean, you
Right.
see this in, I don't know, in the wellness industry.
Oh my
Just do
gosh.
this one thing.
Yeah,
You listen to me.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, this reminds me so much of the wellness where it's like, yes, there are ground rules that are helpful to guide your path, but ultimately you have to create your own map. And so many people either, like you said, and I think that over reliance on inner authority is where we see a lot of conflict because people assume like this is my way and it is the right way. And that is what is, it's missing that piece of everyone's different, and there's also like we all have our own perspective and lens through we're looking through things, and then the over reliance on external authority is not great either because it prevents us from our own curiosity, intuition, exploring what resonates, critical thinking, all of that stuff where it's like cult like, and so that
Oh,
balance of both is so important, and I'm so glad you brought that up.
no, thank you for naming it. Yeah, and even using the cult reference, right? I've been thinking a lot these days about what are the limits of trusting a teacher? What is it that a teacher would do that would make me step back from that teacher? What is it that a specific political leader might do that will that would make me want to step back, need to step back, have an ethical responsibility to step back from that person? It's something that I think we need to have more conversation about. Around spiritual teachers, around wellness influencers, around our political leaders. And I have great curiosity without getting specific around some of my friends who I'm shocked at the limits they're willing to go and the behavior they're willing to entertain in the leaders they follow,
Mhm.
because they're people that I know, that I love, who have integrity, who have ethics, and they're following people who don't seem to have that same ethical framework. And it's a question we have to ask ourselves over and over.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really true when it comes to the political landscape and the polarization as people are so embedded in their sides that it's hard to like have meaningful conversations as well. And just you see, I notice just as somebody who's over, the recent years kind of backed away from politics altogether because I'm like, I'm not claiming either of these sides. I cannot be a part of this system. It's inherently meant to divide us, and people are so stuck in their dogmatic thinking of like right versus left that they can't even see the hypocrisy in what they're saying or doing.
Yeah.
It's like when it's your leader's side, it's fine, but when it's the other leader, it's not fine. And so just that kind of behavior, and not to mention like the lack of high quality leaders in the world, isn't really, very exciting at this point. But I think that it's been hard to watch, especially participating on social media as like a business owner and someone who's trying to participate in moving the world forward in a meaningful way. I just don't see how our dialogue regarding politics, particularly on social media, is helpful in any way. It seems people just can't separate themselves from the party they align themselves with in order to have meaningful conversations across differences. And that's super tough to watch as just somebody who's I feel not married to anyone, not married to either side at this point. I consider myself more of an independent now. So, yeah, I I don't even know how we create that. And I guess that's a bigger question too, is I think you were touching upon this earlier with our society and capitalism kind of creating a space where we're really disconnected from ourselves and not realizing that these systems can implement anxiety and depression and a detachment from our soul. And so I wanted to ask what you think contributes to that disconnection from our spirit overall in the larger realms of society. I know you mentioned capitalism, and then kind of looking forward as to how, in your perspective, do you think a reconnection to our soul and spirit might be healing in some of these areas, like political divides or an inability to separate external authority from internal authority?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, it's why your work is so important. It's why I've given my life to this work, helping people to cultivate a spiritual life. And it all begins with a kind of reverence for our shared humanity. That um, across all the identities, um, we're united in our humanity. And so that's the starting point.
Mm,
Ironically, before we get to divinity, we start with our humanity. We start with the fact that we all are longing for love and connection, and that we all feel pain, and we're all trying to make our way through this world, um, and find deeper love and less pain. So we can all start there, right? The person that I disagree with most politically or theologically, I have that in common with, and we share this beautiful planet. Um, and so we start there, and the work is incredibly important because if we can't cultivate a sense of shared humanity, we will kill each other and we will destroy the planet
yeah.
because um, because the system set up right now in this hyper capitalistic mode, and it's not that capitalism is inherently bad, it's that without spirituality, it's a kind of runaway train, and
Hmm.
it's seeking profit and greed and material wealth, um, to the exclusion of everything else. And so I believe that if I believe we're hardwired for God, that we're hardwired to connect with something bigger, that the
Hmm.
heart is created to give itself away. And so if you don't give your heart to something greater, you will end up giving yourself to something less worthy, less noble. And in this capitalistic soup that we live in, you'll end up giving yourself to material goods, to greed, to acquisition, to competition, and you'll forget who you really are at the spiritual level. You'll experience in this culture of ours a kind of spiritual homesickness. Henry Nouwen said it best. Do you know this name, Henry Nouwen? He's a
Mm-mm.
wonderful spiritual teacher. He's no longer with us, but one of the great Christian spiritual teachers in the English language in the late 20th century. He taught here at Yale Divinity School. He taught at Harvard. He taught at Notre Dame. And he said there are five lies of identity that we are prone to in our Western context. And he said the lies are this: um, I am what I have, right? So it's the over identification with material possession.
Hmm.
Number two, I am what I do, is the kind of performance principle, right? I'm only worthy, I'm only good based on my accomplishment and what I'm producing in the world. This is certainly inherited from capitalism. I am what other people think of me.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, this comparison that's
I've,
so
yeah.
prevalent, right?
I'm
Yeah, do
like,
you
I've
feel
moved
sense
through
that?
all these. I'm
Yeah.
still in some of them.
Yeah, yeah, we're all steeped in them, right? And then these last two are maybe the most toxic, and I see it in my students certainly here at Yale, who are high achievers and brilliant, and there's a kind of shame that they might not be brilliant enough, right? So they work their whole life to get here to Yale, and then they feel like, gosh, I need to really perform, and impress all the people around me. And so 4 and 5 are super heavy. Um, 4 is um, I'm nothing more than my worst moment.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And then number 5, I'm never allowed to be anything less than my best moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can't be imperfect. I have to be
Oh.
achieving at this super fabulous, illusory, perfect space all the time. So if we live life according to those 5 illusions, that I am what I do, I am what I have, I am what other people think, I'm nothing more than my worst moment, and I can't be anything less than my best moment, then we suffer under the weight of the lie. And that's not who we are, and we create false selves constantly over and over throughout our life, based on all of those assumptions. And then, of course, what's needed is some form of medication, right? So we have to numb ourselves because the weight of that is so heavy. So of course we find sex and drugs and experiences and houses and clothes and shopping and right consumer. We find anything to medicate that away. It's all very predictable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder too, with our society structured the way it is and um, capitalism, right? Creating these systems that sort of benefit from us being oppressed, thinking that we need more things outside of ourselves, creating, even systems that benefit from us being sick or medicated and all of that and out of touch and disempowered. Even the political system, you could say, benefits from us not being critical thinkers or tapped in or, active in our power, I guess I should say. And part of me has this belief system that Earth School kind of needs this level of darkness, otherwise our souls can't really evolve. But I'm curious about your thoughts about, you know, is it a collective darkness that is meant to be here for us? Do you think it's just systems that have evolved in ways that happen to be like coincidentally evil, or it's an organized darkness? Like, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on the darkness in the world?
Oh
Is
my
it a
gosh.
conspiracy theory? Is it meant for our souls to evolve? Is it
Yeah.
just happenstance of corrupt systems that continue to grow?
Right.
I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, there are insights of all of those that I find really persuasive. So maybe I could take just a few of the kernels and offer them up in my own way. I mean, I'm no final authority, but I'll share what I sort of my working thesis on all of
We'll
this. I mean,
measure
one,
it against
yeah,
your inner authority.
yeah, yeah. So here's my inner authority coming out saying, part of me really appreciates the Buddhist aspect of this, right? Buddhist perspective on this, which is to say that light and shadow coexist. There is no light without shadow. And so you can you can make peace with the reality that there will always be the shadow side of life, and every light that we cast also casts a shadow, right? And so that's
You
kind of
can
part of the
feel that when you start on your healing journey. Truly, you
oh,
can. You're like, oh, wow. The more in your power you get, it is interesting to see what butts up against the light you create. That was really hard for me, but sorry to interrupt.
oh no, thank you for naming that, right? And at first, like the shame can be overwhelming. My goodness, what I have done. My
Hmm.
goodness, the amount of pain that I've caused myself and others,
Hmm.
people that I've loved, right? This is something that we all inevitably have to wrestle with and surrender to, even as we seek to not harm others. That not harming is not a choice, and we'll have to bring various healing modalities and practices in our lives to repair. We've got to get really good at repairing. So yes, there's always going to be rupture. There's always going to be shadow and darkness in the world. So that's sort of the first piece. Um, yeah, we hold a kind of collective ignorance in the world. Is sort of part two of how I think about this. That we so want to make our pain go away that we're willing to try anything. And of course, the problem with any form of self medication is that it works for a little while, right? Alcohol works until it doesn't, until there's diminishing returns, until it creates more problems than it heals, right? This is true with whatever your drug of choice is. And some of us are just addicted to achievement and approval. The insidiousness of that form of addiction is that we get rewarded for it. And the shadow side is often hidden.
Mm.
And so often in spaces when I'm working with, really high net worth folks and folks who've risen to the height of industry and billionaires, they've become so celebrated and successful that they don't want to let go of some of these self-medication patterns, right? So, yeah, we have a collective delusion, and that we're unwilling to meet our own pain. Everything shifts when you're willing to make space for your own pain, right? And that's the central question of spirituality, right? What do you do with your pain?
Yeah.
And are you willing um, to process and be with pain?
Yeah.
It's tremendously courageous. Don't you find that this is sort of the fundamental issue in your work with folks?
Yeah. And I also find it's a fundamental issue in healing the world because I find that a lot of people aren't willing to face their own pain or their own wounding, and that inevitably gets projected outwards, even in the lens of like current events and people on social media and just like the energy at which we try to approach current events or interpersonal dynamics or our relationships. If we're not willing to face our own pain and we have unhealed trauma or repressed emotions, it's always going to come out sideways. And I think a lot of times we look at anywhere else we can direct it other than ourselves and the healing work that needs to be done. And so it really is like, there's so much collateral damage when people are unwilling to face their own pain. And I think that's a big part of, you know, a big byproduct of this like escapism and capitalism and find everything you need outside of yourself is that so many people are feeding into that immediate gratification and not digging
Yes.
into the inner work. And it shows in the way we communicate with each other that we don't have empathy. It shows that we can't listen, that we can't hear an opinion we don't agree with, that we don't
Mm.
have the nervous system to hear something we don't like or that doesn't align with our belief systems. I think it really shows on a greater scale that people are unwilling to face their own pain when you look around and see the society we live in.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And this impulse to want to find something outside yourself to complete you or to make the pain go away. That's the fundamental instinct that we get wrong. And in fact, this is the image from the Garden of Eden, from the book of Genesis, that it's this image to reach outward as if the apple or anything outside yourself is gonna complete you. I want to name one more dimension of call it evil or sort of what's wrong, this fundamental diagnosis with our society that I've really gleaned from Phil Stutz. I don't know if you've read True and False Magic by this wonderful therapist and spiritual teacher, Phil Stutz. I'd recommend it to everyone. Um, and and he names he names it part X. He said there is a force in the world that is persistently trying to sabotage your growth.
Hmm.
And this is not something that I might have been comfortable with 20 years ago. Um, and yet, now that I celebrate my 50th year on the planet, I notice in myself this necessity to be constantly working against an opposing force. And he'll describe part X because he doesn't have a name for it, right? X is just sort of like an algebra variable, right? It's this thing that's constantly telling you you can't do it. Stay in bed. Don't create. You'll never grow. Don't even try to grow. Um, and I've been really, frankly, I've just been convinced after all these years that there does seem to be some counterbalancing force that's
Resistance
pushing
to flow.
resistance to flow. Absolutely. And so, what Phil Stutz will say is there's three things in the world that never change. There will be pain, there will be uncertainty, and there will be a need to constantly do this inner work to oppose the force of part X.
Yeah. Have you read the book The War of Art? I forget the author,
I
but
don't know
he
this
talks
one.
about the resistance we have towards our creative tendency as humans and how, and I feel I totally resonate that there is an inner resistance with all of us to achieving our fullest potential. And I believe a big part of that is channeling our creativity.
Yeah.
And I just think as humans that our creative expression is so healing. It's just a part of what we're here to do, to share our unique view of the world, because I think we're all little fragments of God. And then we're like, hey, this is my like reflection back of reality, and that creative exchange of taking your interpretation of reality and putting it back out with your own lens on it is what I believe we're here to do. And that book is all about, how we have this inner resistance to creation. And I can tell, even when starting your own business, there's always a lot of people that are following the mainstream and they're kind of triggered by it or not as
That's
supportive
right.
as you would think. And I think a lot of people are stuck in prisons of the mainstream, like this is what you're supposed to do with your life. And when you step outside of that, other people step outside of it, it's reminding them like, we all have the opportunity to create whatever we want to come here to create. But for some of us, the programming and the implanted resistance is like keeping us stuck in boxes. And then you see other people out of it, and it can be a little bit triggering. But yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think in the sacred texts that have nourished my heart, the Hebrew scriptures, and the very first book in the Hebrew Bible, the book of Genesis, describes this act of creation in which God literally breathes life into humanity and breathes life into the universe and creates us, as the scripture says, in God's image. And I believe what it means to be created in the image of the divine is to be created in the image of the one who creates. Right? So to create is in fact the divine essence in us manifesting itself. The fundamental work of being a human being is to create. The opposite of fear is creation. So if you want to sort of work with that fear energy, and we all have some amount of it, the first step is to create something, and it could be creating a cup of tea. It could be creating, bread, or bake some cookies,
Yeah.
or create, a walk with a friend, right? So creation can be subtle and small, humble, it could be massive, but we as humans need to create or else we wither.
Yeah, I've noticed how so many people, I started my sober curious sister circles in the yurt here that I'm in. I started them with just personal development workshopping and breath work and meditation, because nervous system regulation, of course, is so important with turning away from self-medicating in any fashion and just manifesting the life we want from a recalibrated nervous system. But I started doing crafting circles where we paint, or we've done pressed flowers, or we've done vision boarding. I'm gonna do like bedazzled mini pumpkins for our next
Amazing.
one while we talk about shadow work. So I definitely really have started to see, and I've found in my own sobriety journey how healing and therapeutic creating has been,
Yes.
creating my own business, getting creative with my business and the expression of it, realizing I can make anything I want. And that spirit transcends so much of our life and mindset, to realize like you create the reality you want, and creating is what makes your reality meaningful. And you, an active participant in life as it's happening, and taking that opportunity to connect to those energies of flow through creativity. And just that to me has been like the real pinnacle of my own spiritual relationship, is just finding this flow with life through surrender and creativity that I never knew existed. I was
Yeah.
definitely one of those, like, I am because I produce people
Yes.
prior, and was just kind of like milestone and achievement after milestone and achievement. And now I'm more like, hey, you can like lean back a little and let things unfold. You're in alignment. That's what the beauty of getting in alignment is. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that creation element is so cool. Um,
It's beautiful to be able to create without the capitalist production mindset,
mhm.
right? Uh, because that's a losing game. And the finish line is always pushed, right? And so no matter what you produce, oh gosh, there's something else and I'm not enough until I produce that next thing. And I tell you, this is what, and I'm thrilled and delighted that crafting is a part of this in your world because, for me, knitting and crochet have been a really powerful part of healing the producer and achiever in me, and it's been a real mirror to see myself and to see the real shamey parts, the perfectionist parts, the part of myself that's absolutely critical and hateful and violent in terms of my own relationship with myself, right? I couldn't see it. Um, but it's my fiber, it's my knitting for sure that has helped me to be much more gentle and gracious and compassionate with myself and with my many, many imperfections.
Yeah, I know. Starting to observe that inner dialogue is pretty wild. You're like, whoa, I'm a major a-hole to myself. I am so mean and my expectations are really high. And yeah, I've really started to. I read this book a while back, Frequency. I forget who the author was, but I've just really been leaning into that. Every choice carries a frequency. And
Yes.
even in the health and wellness world, we have a lot of perfectionism and rigidity with
Mhm.
approaches. And like that all feeds into the accumulative frequency you're operating at. And that is represented by your total health and wellness. And so, this element of like energy and spirituality and all of it, and how it ties into our overall expression of health and our overall experience of life and our overall levels of fulfillment is so fascinating to me. And it makes me think. I know we don't have tons of time, but I want to focus on this last question, which is it makes me think a lot about how our conventional health model, there's, focus on mental health and physical health, but there really isn't like a big focus on spiritual health. And
Yeah.
how do you think that's detrimental for us? And what do you envision a model looking like that includes spiritual health as just as important as these other branches of health and well-being?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me say a couple of things. One is that I'm happy to do a part two of this, even if you want to save the podcast and save the edit, and we can do a part two at some point if you feel like you don't have enough. My apologies. I didn't realize Ryan had something afterward. Um, so let me answer this question because I'm really super passionate about it. Um, Spirit is intrinsic to life. To forget the spirit is to forget a massive component of what it means to be a human being. So we cannot thrive. We cannot talk about wellness if we're not honoring our spirit. And often online you'll see the wheel of wellness. It sort of looks like a beautiful flower blossoming, and I'm a gardener, part of me loves the image, right? And you have like um, financial wellness and wellness at work and exercise and relationships and spirituality. And for years, I taught that wellness wheel. But I'm going to say something pretty critical about the wellness wheel, and it comes from a place of real meditation, study, and conviction, and that is spirituality isn't one petal on the flower of wellness.
It's the flower.
Spirituality is the integration of all of the parts.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you don't have spirituality in the mix, what you have is separate, isolated parts. You have fragmented parts that are not interconnected. Spirituality is the glue that integrates the whole system because wellness is a system of harmoniously integrated parts. And so without it, um, we're just dabblers. And I think as human beings, we need more. than dabbling. We need integration. We need harmonious connection with all these facets of our life. And so I think there's a really exciting opportunity, and you're at the forefront of this, and many others as well, are to integrate all these parts of our lives and to live with integrity, right? So that all these pieces fit. Um, and and I'm really excited because more and more people are willing to have these conversations.
Yeah, I know. And I think more and more people are opening, and as turbulent as the landscape of the world can be, from time to time, just slightly, I find that it's actually seeming to, I kind of look at it as shadow work in some ways, like a lot is surfacing in order for integration to happen. And on the silver lining of it all, I do think it's causing more people to turn to faith and their version of it and what really matters, and looking, a little bit deeper into themselves and moving past quick fixes. And I do see this willingness of more and an increasingly larger number of people that are willing to do the work and just really dig in. And so I do feel hopeful that spirituality is on the rise in many forms, but I look at spirituality as the umbrella, and religions fall underneath.
Yeah, I mean, 80% of Americans say that they're spiritual and that they have some kind of spiritual practice in our lives. And so that's really hopeful. And for me, the basis of spirituality is love and compassion. As a Christian, that the ultimate goal of this life is to follow in the footsteps of someone who loved over and over and over, even when the cost was his own life.
Hmm.
And so I am trying incredibly imperfectly, spectacularly imperfectly, to center my life around courageous and bold love. And if more of us can be curious about what that entails and have conversations about how do we create communities of love, communities where it's maybe just a little bit easier to love one another, so that we could all show up with fullness of heart and mind and body and spirit. Um, I want to be a part of those conversations, and I want to be a part of those communities, and I'm really thankful for all the work you do, Katie, to help people show up, with wholeheartedness.
I'm really grateful for all the work you do to do the same. It makes it feel like we're not alone in our pursuits. And I know
Yes.
initially when I started my business and decided to start doing, the deeper inner work myself, it certainly felt lonely. And I feel like it's been such a beautiful blossoming expansion to follow my heart and have love for myself enough to make changes, even that were scary, and how it's organically guided me to just where I'm meant to be and the people I'm around supposed to be around. And that just reminding, everyone listening to follow that, fight against the resistance and follow those nudges of flow from your heart, because it is scary to stand up and do the inner work and get curious about the life you're creating and making a meaningful impact and doing something purposeful, but it's so worth it.
All the good stuff in life is scary for a
Yeah.
moment or two, right?
Yes. And so the last question is just giving people the opportunity to share where they can find you. What are you up to? Do you have a website, offerings, anything you want to share outside of your work at Yale?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm most active on Instagram, Brandon.Nappi. I try to offer some words of encouragement and inspiration and teaching around spirituality on nearly a daily basis. You can find me on my website as well, brandonnappi.com, where I have a list of upcoming retreats, and I'll be on Insight Timer, as well, offering free
Oh,
meditation. It's just my gift to the world, and a place where we can all practice together, because we need practices to help cultivate sobriety and wellness and wholeheartedness. And we can't love the world without practices that help to cultivate a more generous and tender heart. And so that's what I'm creating on Insight Timer.
I love that. You know, it's funny. I was just using Insight Timer. I'm like, I wonder how they select these meditation teachers. I was thinking that just yesterday or today. So odd.
Yeah,
Not odd at all, actually. Synchronicities are a way of my life at this
synchronicity.
point.
Yeah.
But I will let you go. And if everyone loves this episode, make sure you like, share, subscribe. Go follow Dr. Brandon Nappi on Instagram. Check out his website. And perhaps we will have a part two coming your way down the line with more. Have a beautiful day, everyone, and thanks for tuning in.